Welcome to my channel. My name is Mel Hartley. I'm a former shopaholic who is now on a financial wellness journey. So I don't think there's anyone on this planet who hasn't made a financial mistake, especially when you're in your early 20s. I feel like it's kind of a rite of passage. In this video, I'm going to be ranking my top 8 financial mistakes and reflecting on what I would have done differently had I known what I know now. Here we go. So starting out with number 8, Postmates and Ubers. I mean, we're all guilty of late night Postmates or taking an Uber when we could have driven ourselves. That's my thing with Uber especially, is I Ubered when I could have just driven. And my theory was, well, I'll save money on parking, or I don't have to worry about parking or whatever. But over time, the Postmates and the Ubers, those prices multiply so quickly. So they're kind of on my list, like at the bottom, because where I regret them in certain circumstances, obviously they're convenient in others. Number 7, cheap clothes and fast fashion. I used to buy, I'm trying to think of like Charlotte Russe, really cheap stuff that would last maybe a couple washes, and then it would just completely vanish into nothing. And at the time it seems cheaper, like sweet, I'm saving a little bit of money. I'm paying $10 for a shirt versus, you know, 30 or 40 or 50. But at the end of the day, you just have to keep buying more and more, so it's not really saving you any money. Plus it's really bad for the environment. I actually did a video about clothing subscriptions and why I love them so much. So looking back now, had that been like more of a thing back in the day, I would have just done that, and I would have had really nice pieces of clothing, like professional, good material and fabric, and more long-term, would last longer. Number 6, quitting beauty school. So yes, I am a beauty school dropout. My regret financially with this is that when I dropped out, I had only been in school for about a month. It was right before I got to the floor, and like the floor is where you can start like working on models, like hair models. And right before that happened, I just had like kind of a breakdown, like I don't want to do this, I don't see this myself doing this long term, and I quit. And I still had to pay $8,000 for a school, like tuition, I think overall was, I don't remember, it was like between 12 and 15,000, which, I mean, considering like if I wanted to go to Harvard or something, it would have been like 100,000, 200,000, whatever. So in comparison, yes, it was very cheap. It was a lot cheaper, but $8,000 for not even having, you know, my certificate or anything. And the reason why I wish I would have just continued to do it was that it would have been continue to do it versus just not doing it at all. And I wish I would have done it, continued to do it, and graduated, because that would be a really good way for me to have like a backup career, or employment in case, you know, something went wrong. Number 5, applying for jobs that didn't pay well. A lot of people, obviously including me, have made the mistake of just wanting to get a job, so they just take whatever and they don't consider or factor in the income from it. And that's why I'm a really big fan of lifestyle budgeting, because if you kind of backtrack and you know that number off the top of your head or ahead of time, it's a lot easier for you to negotiate your salary and feel confident negotiating your salary versus just taking whatever they'll give you. Like, example sake, if you know that all of your budgeting, like you need $18 an hour at a full-time job in order to get all your bills comfortably paid and have money in your savings account, then if you apply for a job and it's like your dream job, but they're only offering $18 an hour or they're only offering, you know, a significant amount less than what you need, then you can use that as like a negotiation of, well, I need X amount of dollars in order to provide for my family and to survive off of. So it just, it's in your head more, so then it's not like, oh yeah, I'll just take it. Whatever you're giving me, I'll take it. I'm desperate. Number 4, business investments. So I am an entrepreneur. I have started several businesses, and I started my first real business when I was in my mid-20s, and I had no idea what I was doing, and I didn't have a marketing budget. I can't stress enough the importance of having a marketing budget, and a lot of times people have everything figured out except for marketing, and when it comes time to like opportunities come up or you're approached by a marketing person, you're like, no, I don't need that. That's a waste of money. Or you spend money like I did on marketing things that just weren't really beneficial to my business. And it should have, before I even started my business, I should have really had my marketing plan put into place. But I started my business so completely randomly. It just didn't really like occur to me, and I had never gone to business school or anything like that. And then I also tried my hand with real estate, and because of my horrible credit, it really put a damper on me investing in long-term rentals, short-term rentals. It's already really hard enough to do or to try to get funding for short-term rentals because it's super risky for the bank or for the lender. And I just wish I would have put more thought and planning into it. I'm not saying that I regret starting the businesses. I just wish, like, on the financial side, I would have put way more thought into it. Number 3, traveling when I was self-employed. I love to travel. I'm sure many of you do as well. It's super fun, and the life experience that you get in meeting people from different cultures and different backgrounds, and you know, all of that is so fun and interesting to me. So at the time I would justify it with, like, no one ever regrets traveling and you know, experiences and paying for experiences. I'd rather spend money on traveling and doing that than like spending money on cars or clothes or shoes or whatever. So I try to justify it, but at the same time, I couldn't afford it. There were certain times when I didn't even have a credit card because my credit was so bad that I couldn't get a credit card to save my life. It wasn't until maybe, I think like four years ago, so like my late 20s, when I was actually able to get a credit card again, and that was like such a small, I think the credit limit was like $300. So unless I'm just, you know, going on a road trip somewhere, staycation, whatever, like that's not a very large budget. I'm not as savvy when it comes to like, I'm still learning some tricks about travel budgeting. But I couldn't afford it. I wish I would have just skipped it. Because looking back also, some of it was like, depending on like what I was doing career-wise at the time, it was like, well, this could be potentially a business trip. Like I could try to write it off if business came of it, networking, blah, 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 blah. But ultimately, nothing ever came of it in that aspect. I mean, I've made friends, I've learned new things, I had fun, I had, got some great experiences out of it, but could I have lived without these trips? Absolutely, yes. I wish I would have just waited until I could afford it. Number 2, living in luxury apartment buildings. I know a lot of people, I watched some other videos of, financial mistakes I've made in my 20s, and I noticed this is like a big one. And some people kind of explain their reasoning behind it, and some people don't. I think my reasoning is kind of equal to what I've heard other YouTubers say. They maybe would, they thought at one point like, oh, I can afford this, I'm making more money, things are going well financially, so I can upgrade to a bigger, nicer apartment with more bells and whistles. And then something happens and, they're back to a smaller income or whatever. That's happened to me where, I think I can afford it, or I have some like business investments that, okay, once this starts paying off, I'll totally be able to afford this. But, I was always self-employed, and it's always a challenge when you're self-employed because, there literally were months where I made $0 or like $60 or something, like $100. It was a lot harder in my early 20s when I was living in LA and I was a struggling actor and model and worked in production, and my income was just so up and down. And then even when I was self-employed as an entrepreneur and owning my own business, that has had its own challenges. So my other reasoning for it, which was I think my biggest like excuse, was that it's like safety. I've had roommates before, but for the most part I've lived alone, or I've lived in my own apartments like several times. And it's hard being a single female and living solo. There's a lot of weird people out there, and I have lived in East Hollywood, which is like super sketch, and I've lived in places where I didn't even feel comfortable walking down the street, like in the daytime by myself. So I was like, I just want a building that's secured. And a lot of the times with those buildings, there's 24-hour concierge, or, there's just more like that goes into it. So it's obviously going to cost more for rent. And then I would also factor in like, oh, okay, like if there's gym, like I'm going to save so much money on gym memberships because there's a gym in my building, and yada. And I mean, I do like it. I do worry about like my safety, but looking back, I just wonder if before I had moved out, like I should have figured out like a way to save up money first, and then I could have like had some money to live off of, just in case. Like I have never had an emergency fund, and especially in my early 20s. So before I moved out, or before moving out, I should have forced myself to have a certain X amount of dollars saved up in my emergency fund. And number one, can you guess what it is? It's awful. It's terrible. I used to be very ashamed of it. And now I'm still like ashamed that I did it, but I'm not like ashamed to tell people. I used to not pay my credit cards. I was going through like a lot of weird personal stuff in my early 20s, and everything that I knew about self-taught, what I knew about money and credit and everything, which wasn't a lot, but it's like it all went out of my head and it just like fell out, and I just didn't think like, oh, if I don't pay this balance, like, or if I don't pay this at all, like it'll just disappear and it'll go away and it will never haunt me. That's crazy. And now, obviously, like I learned the hard way that like I definitely learned the hard way, and I just wish I would have paid my minimum payment, because it wasn't even a lot. When I got my first credit card, I believe I was 18 or 19, and again, very, very low. I think it was like 500 was the limit or something, maybe 1,000, which I at the time thought was like so much money. And you know, I would max them out going shopping, buying purses, blah 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 blah, and I just didn't think I needed to pay it, and I justified that for a really long time. And it wasn't until I remember I had a roommate in like 2013, and we were talking about budgeting and like money and stuff, because you know, rent and everything, and she was like oh yeah, like I have to have enough to make my credit card payment. And I was like, what? Like, why are you worried about? I didn't say this to her, but I was just like, why are you worried about that? That's so weird. Because I wasn't even thinking about like my credit cards, and I had moved so many times that I don't even think they could keep up with like to send me, you know, the bills and the statements and everything. And then just slowly over time, I was like, okay, this is something that I think it was when I started my business, like my business, my first real business, and I needed money to start my business, like keep it going, or I wanted to like get marketing and everything. And it wasn't until then when I like realized, like they would tell me like, your credit's horrible, like we can't approve you for this loan. And I was like, what? And so that's kind of when it all started. You know, so this has been going on for a really, really long time. It took me a decade to completely ruin my credit, and now hopefully less than a decade, but I gotta dig myself out. So there you have it, my top 8 worst financial mistakes ever. Which ones were you surprised to hear? Leave a comment below and let me know. I'm curious. And feel free to share your biggest financial mistakes so I don't feel so alone. Spill the tea. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. And remember, mistakes are just a learning tool. There is nothing to be ashamed of. We all make mistakes. We all, you know, we don't all have somebody teaching us about money and finance in the beginning. So it's been a taboo for a really long time, and I hope to open a discussion about it so we can kind of, it's money. It's not that big of a deal to talk about it. If you enjoyed this video, I would appreciate it if you give it a like. And if you enjoy this type of content, go ahead and subscribe to my channel. I post new videos every week.